the purpose of coming together tonight, I thought, was I sat here and thought about what is the problem with the healthcare system in this country. What are we doing to fix it? She's 81 years old. She had some series of, we'll call it episodes in Florida. She lives there basically alone after her husband died about a year ago. What do people do when they get sick, they're at that age, they may or may not have coverage to help them out? What do they do for assisted living? What do they do for problems they might incur?
Yeah.
Don't you guys think that there's a problem with the system in this country with the way things are being run now?
I think it's a huge problem, and only going to get worse as we baby boomers get to the needing those services. I think it's only going to get worse, Mike.
Well, we say as baby boomers. What about the younger people that that may not have the ability to pay for healthcare coverage right now? But
I'm saying
what do they do?
I'm saying that demographic bubble is coming now, and that's going to really hit the system.
It is.
It's really going to break the system down. And you kind of talked about it in a kind of a holistic way. I think that's the problem. All these solutions are talking about one segment of the problem, and I think it's a far-reaching problem.
I think it's more than people even conceive of. I'm diabetic myself. I had a heart attack 7 years ago. I can remember one day getting a bill in the mail that said pay $25, but it was like a 9-page, $58,000 bill. What would I have done if I didn't have coverage to pay for that bill?
You probably would have had another heart attack.
I would have had definitely would have.
They would have put you on the installment plan.
Yeah, right.
But things changed over time, Mike. They hospitals, was it 5-6 years ago, were able to go from being a nonprofit to being a for-profit institution. So suddenly they now had stockholders and they had executives who wanted bonus checks and everything, so they drove up the prices.
And they're worried more about costs than
So you think...
Are they worried more about costs than they are medical?
No, they're worried more about making profits.
But if they hadn't gone to privatization, you think the system would be better off today? You think that's a contributing factor to where we are?
Well, it's more than just that. The evolution of costs were that, and it's just true in industry today. Labor is the biggest expense in anything, in manufacturing and services.
Right.
Everything is labor. How do you reduce labor? So what they did to get hospital costs down years ago is they started kicking people out of the hospitals and eliminating beds.
Right.
Now, I remember about 14, 15 years ago when the Leahy came to the town of Burlington saying we applied to the state for more beds because there aren't enough beds in this area to service all the patients.
Right.
They got the beds, and then it was only 5 or 6 years ago that all the hospitals started closing down.
Right.
Well, if there weren't enough beds, why did Sims, Choate, all these hospitals close down? And now they're turning around and they're coming back saying we need more beds because they went to the other extreme.
I do also remember an interesting anecdote, and again, it's the heart attack. And you might remember this story because I think I've told you this. I was in there for 5 days. And during the 5 days that I was in there, they get you all wired up and they get you on this monitor and that monitor and everything else, and they're telling you, what to do and what drugs to take and all that. And I had 2 wires that were implanted into my chest, and they were on a remote control device which eventually went back out to the nurses' station so that they could monitor you while they weren't, in the room.
Right.
Last day that I was in there, this young doctor comes in and he says, "We're going to disconnect these wires today." And I didn't know that at the time that was going to be the day that I was going to leave. And I said, "So what's the significance of that?" And he explained to me that it was a monitor that went out to the nurses' station. And he said, quote unquote, "You look fine, and I guarantee you that within 2 hours after I disconnect this machine, you'll be out of here." And I said, "Why?" He says, "Because that monitor also goes to the insurance company." Okay? And they can tell this gentleman doesn't need any more care. And I could have stayed an extra day or two because I really didn't feel that good, and I think that I could have used some extra care, maybe some tips or something from the doctors or the nurses, but you're out of there. I think that's a darn shame. I really do.
I hate to tell you, but I had a lot to do with this. About 30 years ago, I was working for Mass Eye and Ear, and every hospital in the area was trying to figure out how can they reduce hospital costs. And the obvious way was to get people out of the beds early. And what was happening was the doctors were leaving people in forever, in part because they didn't want to get them out on weekends because that meant they had to come in and discharge them.
Right.
So what they were essentially saying was, you come in, you stay until the doctor says you're free to go, and you get out, and the average length of stay for eye patients was like 10 days. And they did some statistics and found out that these people could get out significantly less. And as a result, they could, in fact, get new patients in. And more importantly, they began to shift when they would allow people to come in for optional surgery so that they would be guaranteed to stay over the weekend. So it used to be that hospital utilization would go from about 75, 80% on Monday to up to around 120%. People would be in the halls. And then on Saturday night, it'd be down to 40, 50%.
Get them home for the weekend.
Right. So the project that I was involved in, actually did the programming for and the design, was to shift the people so that they all stayed over the weekend, which pissed the doctors off. But we, in fact, went to a point where the year, I think it was 1968 or 69, there was a huge thing in the Globe talking about hospital rates. And every major hospital in Boston raised their room rates, except for Mass Eye and Ear, which dropped theirs 25%. And this is the pattern that's been used in part. The statistical thing saying we can get you out in 5 days instead of 10 to cut the costs and unfortunately send people home before they're ready to go.
Well, but that's what's happened in the last few years is the hospital costs have gone down. Hospital total, as a percentage of the total dollars, hospital costs have gone down. But the flip side of that is that the prescription drugs have gone through the roof.
So aftercare costs have gone up too.
Yeah, but is that because doctors are saying, all right, I have to get you out of the bed, and in order to make sure that you're home at least 2 weeks before you have another heart attack, I'll just pump you up with drugs. So it had nothing to do with you being released earlier.
Well, there's another factor.
there's a-
They're getting you out of the hospital, but they're sending you off to a quasi-medical facility, a nursing home.
But in the meantime, they're keeping the hospital productive too.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I
right?
mean,
so they're running a more.
logically, it makes
It
sense.
comes down to dollars and cents. Then,
Yeah.
right. So what's more important, dollars and cents,
That's
or
the
your
question.
care?
That's the question. Everything you described was a business decision.
That's
Yes.
exactly
It-
right.
It really had nothing to do with patient care. And those may be mutually,
But the two are intertwined.
right? They may be mutually exclusive, right?
Right.
If I'm going to try to drive up profits, it's going to be at the expense of health of the care of the patient. And I think that's where the system is in a dilemma. I don't know.
It's not clear that the patient care is actually suffering that much, although you could say.
Well, you know, tell
yeah.
that to somebody who's in the hospital who used to have a nurse come in on a regular basis. Now they get an assistant or a candy striper doing things that a nurse used to do, and they'd be lucky if they can see a nurse in the course of a day.
Well,
So how
do-
is the
Do
care-
they need a nurse to do those things? Do they need a nurse to prop them up, to empty a bedpan?
Well,
You
th-
really
but
need a
these
trained
people aren't
medical
doing just
person?
that. They're providing the prescription drugs to the patients in the hospital. They're not giving them needles, as far as I know, but they
They're
are bringing,
healthcare
distributing
providers.
the drugs.
That's how they describe
They're
them.
not nurses doing that. They're people who are maybe a nurse's assistant or somebody who doesn't even have a degree.
And you know, you keep talking about the drugs and the prescriptions too. Who's making money there? Who's losing money? You know, it seems to me that they're for what we're paying. Thank God I'm covered under under a plan, and I think we pay like $80 a month for all the medicines that I take. I'd be paying hundreds of dollars if I wasn't under a plan.
Yeah, well,
what
you
do
know-
people do if they don't have plans?
They do without
Th-
it, or
it-
the
it-
hospital covers the
So then
cost.
again, you're back to the same situation: cost versus care.
Yeah.
Right.
Nothing is free.
You know, and there are people that
Yeah.
go without it, and you
Right.
know, is it, you know, how does that affect them? That's a sin. It's an absolute sin that somebody who maybe is elderly or just can't afford to do it loses out.
Earlier this week in the Globe, there was an article about a doctor at Mass General who discovered a new drug, and now the manufacturer of the drug is negotiating with Mass General because they're not making enough profit. Mass General is getting too much of the profit for that particular drug. So I can understand that we have to pay for the research and development costs because that has to be spread over the life of that drug. But why is Mass General getting all of this money?
Well, we're paying for their profit.
Exactly.
So why do we?
You know,
why
why-
do we pay for their profit?
You know, if the drug manufacturer is one thing, but why is Mass General getting a ton of money off of this drug? Number one, and number two, why is a doctor at a for-profit hospital prescribing a drug that you know, they invented.
Because you just mentioned the two words that
So are
For-profit
you
is
so are you
Mass
getting the
General
best
for-profit?
cost?
But that's
Product,
that's,
or are you
that is
getting-
the question. Can healthcare be delivered and be profitable? Can it be done?
does
Can
it have to
accomplished?
be delivered and be profitable?
Well, if it isn't profitable, where does the money come to fuel the system? I guess
I'm going
that's
to be the
question.
devil's advocate, and I'm going to say, as an individual, I don't care about whether the companies make profit or not.
I agree, absolutely agree with that. But if they go out of business, then that facility's not going to be there when you have that heart attack to take care of it. And
Which
that-
is- but
I'm
what that's-
retired. I'll go
That's
down
true.
and volunteer, but you really want me?
No.
But again, that goes back to what I said earlier. That, you know, years ago, these were all nonprofit, not-for-profit institutions. Now they're all for-profit institutions.
I don't think they're all for profit. Mass General, for example, I don't really
yeah,
know.
No, I think it's Partner Care. It's held by a for-profit conglomerate.
Is that?
Yeah.
So how does it
okay, 'cause I
work
know
with a
Caritas
teaching
and
school or
Norwood
something
is.
like that?
Not sure about that. But some of the Catholic hospitals, like Caritas Christi, I don't think are for profit. I think they're just a sort of a break-even operation. But the point is, whether there's a profit component or not, if they don't generate enough funds to
To pay the
maintain the
nurse.
facility, there's no
Want a
facility
nurse?
for us to go to, right? I mean,
Eventually, yeah, you're right.
that's why I guess the question goes back to, we could make this into one of our classic liberal versus conservative
I
discussions.
think we already
about
have.
maybe as a nation, this really is an obligation of the nation, and it becomes a taxation question, right?
So
And
what
maybe
you're saying is that the money has to come from the society in general and be spread out to them who need.
it feels like
No,
that to me.
it's more than that. There's inefficiencies in the system that are ridiculous. I just came back from working on a proposal. I was a client out in the Midwest competing for a Medicare contract. There are 4 Medicare contractors nationwide who do nothing but monitor the billing. Right, so that you go to the hospital, you're Medicare, you go to the hospital, the invoice comes in from either the hospital or the doctor or some other provider. The bill goes to these Medicare contractors. They look up, make sure the hospital doesn't have any claims or any violations, and okay, Medicare to pay the bill. Well, those 4 contractors are costing Medicare $500 million a year just to push paper. You know, that's $500 million a year that I would rather see them spend elsewhere, and then just say to a medical facility, if you stiff the public, if you stiff the federal government, you'll go to jail, as opposed to, we're going to spend $500 million a year to make sure you're not stiffing the public.
How do you know that they're stiffing the public unless you have somebody monitoring them?
The paper trail, yeah.
The paper trail.
They also have a second contract, which does nothing but oversee fraud and abuse within the system, and it's separate from all of these underwriters. All these people are doing the pushing paper. This contract is just monitoring for fraud and abuse of the
But
system.
isn't that guy just doing sampling?
No.
He's not looking at every transaction, is he?
Not every transaction, but every provider. They do background checks on every provider. They do site visits on every provider. They go out. And the example that was in the paper a few weeks ago was in Florida. A number of doctors and prosthetic providers stiffed Medicare to the tune of something like $120 million in false sales of prostheses. But it took Medicare 4 months to find that out. And
I'm sure in most cases they never
and the
never
question
find
was,
out.
Yeah.
that Medicare contractor who was not monitoring, but servicing that, why didn't they see all these invoices coming in and say, boy, that's an unusual amount?
That would be my very first question. Why?
You know, why did it
somebody-
take 4
did-
months to
what-
figure out that
Wasn't there a red flag that went up and said
after 4 months?
something's
And
wrong?
then Medicare turned around and said, well, gee, that's great. We caught it in 4 months. You should be happy. And I'm saying, well, wait a minute. With all the systems in place and for all the money you're paying, you should have caught that right away.
What happened to the guys who did the 120 million? Are they going to jail? Or are they being told pay back 10 cents on the dollar because obviously you don't have the rest of the money?
Or are
Don't
they
know.
told just don't do that again, please?
Probably.
Don't know. But,
Because that's really the key. If you make it too expensive to commit the crime, a fair number, not everybody, but a fair number of the people won't do it. But if you make it for free,
yeah, slap it in hand and you go
Yeah.
shut down and open up under a different name.
and tell me how you caught me the last time so I won't do that particular one again.
Exactly.
Right.
Well,
And what about the CEOs of some of these conglomerates? The guy, what's the guy from Health Source Health? They just got off.
and
Oh, the guy from Health
Southern, I
Source,
was
yeah.
just reading that. Yeah.
He basically got off on
He got off.
38 counts, I think.
Yeah.
Not basically.
All 38 counts?
No,
All
absolutely
counts?
did get
How-
off. Yeah.
how did he-
All of the counts
Huh.
he got off on.
How can you be the CEO of a large organization like that and not know any of that stuff?
Because
going on?
his accounting department made some mistakes. That's what he said. It wasn't his responsibility.
He's the number
But
one.
you're the
he's the number
chief
one guy.
executive officer. I always thought you were the
Well,
number
that
one.
was pre-Sarbanes-Oxley. Today, he would be held accountable.
He was accused
He
under
was-
Sarbanes-Oxley.
Actually, I take that back. Unless it's a for-profit hospital, it's not subject to Sarbanes-Oxley.
Health Southern, that was stock.
Okay.
I mean, they
He
were
was
playing all
definitely
kinds of
acquitted.
games. They were making up numbers to make the projections look the way they were supposed
So
to.
you're saying it was subject to Sarbanes-Oxley criteria?
That's what I thought
Really?
I read. And
I'm
he was
shocked that he got
I'm
off.
almost sure that
'Cause
I
he-
heard that on the
CEO is-
news last night too. That
You know, Sarbanes-Oxley mandates that the CEO is held personally responsible.
Right.
he got off on all 35 or 38 counts
Really?
that he was
Walked away.
indicted on. He walked away from
And
it.
it was from a jury trial. But whether it would have been the same result if it had been before an administrative judge, I don't know. But a jury trial, the jury said, "Hey, you're a good guy."
So you have a nice day.
I missed all that news this week. I was a little predisposed.
Given the choice, I'd have been with you.
There's just so much to this issue that I guess we could go on for
Well,
hours and hours and hours.
Well, but never mind that side. What about our side? You know, I'm on COBRA now. I'm self-employed, right? It's costing me $1,250 a month for health insurance. Isn't that a little bit ridiculous?
I think it's crazy.
You know, it's even large companies, corporations. I think the number was something like every employee hour for a company that provides health insurance to the employee is $4 an hour.
Well,
General Motors
So
was
you're
saying
paying out
That-
over
$1,500 per car.
$1,500 per car is attributable to healthcare costs.
So you're paying out $15,000 a year.
But
and are
it's-
you getting $15,000 a
Of
year?
course
in-
not.
in-
Hopefully, you
Not
will
yet.
not get 1 penny back. That's the ideal.
Yeah, hopefully.
But he's not getting what he's paying for.
But the but-
Insurance isn't. You don't want to have the fire in your house so you can get your fire insurance money out. You'd be very happy that you just pay the money and the fire stays away. The same thing about health, if not more so.
How much of the problem do you guys think is related to us as a society, how healthy we are as a society? In other words, are we an unhealthy society that's overwhelming an already
That
burdened
could be a big
system?
factor.
Or are we a healthy society relative to the rest of the world? I don't know how we compare.
You mean because we have so many elderly now, and that's where the big costs
Our
come
diet,
I
our,
think
our
he
diet,
might
In Blue
you know,
Cross, that's the case.
Do we do our part as individuals to keep health costs down? Like, as you say, diet, exercise, not smoking.
Well, but-
do we all do that?
Why do I want if I paid into the system for 40 years? This is like Social Security. If I paid into the system for 40
That's
years
exactly
and
like it.
I never
wasn't
had
sure
a
which
heart
topic we were
attack
talking about.
or anything like that, you know, so essentially, as far as I'm concerned, the health system and the insurance companies got a free ride from me for 40 years. So if I have a heart attack, I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to pay a copay. I don't want to do anything. Just pay my bill. Why do I want to go beat up my body, jogging the track and all this other stuff when I could just be drinking coffee and
When you're
eating jelly
driving
donuts?
your car and you're going down the street, do you want to steer it and get away from that rock in the middle of the road, or do you want to run into it because what the hell, the insurance company's going to pay?
From what he just
Well,
said, he wants to run right into it.
if I'm from Texas, I'll pay a couple of my students to torture for
Guys, I
me.
think we found the problem.
It's him.
No, we were talking about inefficiencies and people ripping off the system. I think we're talking now about the patient side of it. I think there's a lot of abuse on the patient side as well. And I think we have some responsibility. I mean, I don't know how you...
It could be.
Well, they finally came up with discounts for non-smokers, and they're finally forcing non-smokers out the door and to smoke outside, and they're starting to eliminate that. And some companies are even saying, we're not going to hire you if you're a smoker. So they're forcing the employees to be healthier.
But my question is, are we healthier? Are we less healthy than other nations in the world? France,
I don't know if
Japan,
we're healthier, but I can tell you, when I was growing up in the 50s, people sitting around this table, you're basically in the 50s,
Right.
people were dying of heart attacks in the 50s. Damn few people made it to retirement. Them who made it to retirement, at least the guys, died within a year. the things that we're spending a fortune on in terms of health costs, cancer care, didn't exist in the 50s because everybody was dying from the first heart attack. You had
yeah,
a heart
that's
attack,
true.
the chances
Yep.
are you were going to be gone 50 years ago when I was growing up. And today, you're going to live to 70, 80 years old, and you may have a second or a third heart attack along the way.
Peter, you don't need this.
No, wait a minute. Before you take it on me.
Give me the coffee.
I think
Hope everybody else is having a good time. We are.
Do you need any?
We'll have a double. No,
No,
thank
thank
you.
you.
All right. So you're saying advancements in medicine
Yeah.
have led to longevity, longer lifespans.
Right, and we've survived things that used to kill people, and the cost of those things have to be factored in. And then the things that happen to you because you get old. Cancer was not a big problem in the 50s. People
So-
didn't live
Well,
long.
All right,
wait
so
a minute,
longevity,
wait a
so
minute.
longevity's
Wasn't a big problem
So
in the
longevity's driving up
50s.
the cost.
Yeah,
Well,
So,
essentially.
so you oughta, maybe we got to take people out sooner, and that'll help solve the problem.
or
I'm
the-
kidding.
no, you may be kidding, but that's a rational way of looking at it.
And I do think that's a big factor.
As long as I get to make the decision.
What was that movie where they killed everybody over 30?
might be some truth to it. You know, I mean, companies like McDonald's and all of that, they used to push all the fatty foods
Right,
and everything, and
right.
now everybody's health conscious. You know, Ronald McDonald's going to come out with a new campaign to be more health conscious.
Yeah.
And they're still going to
Well,
to
to
answer-
answer,
the
yeah, to
cigarette
answer-
companies,
To answer your
yeah.
question, Tony, when we were kids, we didn't have the large suburbs like we have today.
Right.
More people moved into the suburbs, and they all drive automobiles. When we grew up in the cities, we rode our bikes, walked, we didn't drive all over the place. But living in the suburbs, you're driving like crazy. What I like is what I read the other day about Lexington. That they're encouraging the town to put sidewalks on at least one side of the road, and they're going to try to get kids to walk to school. They're going to try to force cars
that's
off the
interesting.
road by having the kids walk to school.
Are the parents going to allow that? Because I remember.
Well,
Yeah.
you know, the question is, you want to keep seeing your school budget dollars go up, or do you want to let your kids walk and keep the
Right.
dollars down? So
Right.
that's the alternative: reduce the amount of buses, reduce the amount of traffic on the roads.
When we moved to Garrity Road, one of the we looked and the school was a half a mile away. We actually walked it. The fact that there was a school bus meant that we put Al on the school bus, and I'm sure you did the same thing. If there'd been a sidewalk, I don't think we'd have had her walk because too many things can happen.
Well, and the town also made a decision years ago that there are no walkers in town. Either drive them yourself or to take a bus. But the point is,
Yeah.
you know, Lexington said, no, let's get the traffic off the road by putting the kids on the sidewalk. I'm not saying they did it for health reasons. They did
Right.
they did it for budgetary. They were looking at it for budgetary reasons. But I do think that if we had better sidewalks in a lot of communities, if we had better trails and availability to ride a bike as opposed to driving an automobile, yeah, I do think that we would be a little bit healthier. And people are walking more. We see a lot more walkers now than we ever did years ago,
Yeah,
both
that's true.
both at the track and just in the
Yeah.
street. But I do
So
think
he-
you're right.
He's on to something then. And, you know,
well,
we
it's one
might
thing.
be partially.
But my question, I actually think we may be healthier than we were previously.
Well, we're
when I
living
think of-
longer,
when-
so we
when-
must be
Well,
healthier.
when I think about my
Actually,
parents,
individuals are less healthy than they were before because there's so many things that we're surviving that are still there. I don't know. People are exposed to tuberculosis. They probably have low level of
Right,
tuberculosis,
right.
but we keep it under control. That doesn't mean we're
unless you're
healthier.
a healthcare physician at the Boston Hospital there.
Well,
Where
here's
the
some.
woman was. Didn't you guys hear that story
No.
about the woman that was exposed to tuberculosis, and
Oh,
she
yeah.
worked at 7 hospitals.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
within-
yeah.
And she was I think she was a physician, but I'm not.
Uh,
Well, she was
anesthesiologist, maybe.
a healthcare
Yeah,
person.
yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're panicking now because she might have spread it to
Right.
hundreds of thousands of people. Who knows?
Here's one for you. Company on the West Coast has a defibrillator that they implant in your body. It's a radio frequency, and it bounces off GPS
Right.
systems so that they know exactly who you are. And somewhere in some room in some country is a person and
Monitoring you the entire time.
monitoring all these people who have these things on. So if you were to have a heart attack or go into fibrillation, this person can push a button and you're suddenly, you know, you don't even know
You're
that
rejuvenated,
having,
huh?
you don't even know you're having a heart attack. You're eating dinner or something. Suddenly you jump out of your seat because you got shocked. But you know, that's the advancements in medicine today. That kind of stuff exists. That goes into the cost of the system.
Yeah.
So there's a benefit to what we're paying
well,
for.
the
us, which
individual,
is-
but that's-
there's an upside to this too. Then
Yeah, it costs
is,
money.
is some
Nothing's
of this
for
money
free.
being used for research and development to prevent, you know,
Obviously.
future illnesses,
Definitely, and
or are we getting ripped off?
well,
Well, probably a combination. But
There's a lot of advances out there that are getting into microsurgery to reduce
Right.
your hospital stays and to reduce the cost of the surgery. There's better prostheses out there. There's a lot of intelligence, but that's only for the individual. And again, I'm the individual. I had this operation. I don't care that the cost of that was $500,000. You know, my insurance company will pay for it. But the flip side is everybody else had to pay into the system so that the insurance company can afford to give the hospital the
And I'm sure there are
$500,000.
people that have paid into it and never used it too. So
well,
And those are the people who are saying,
Obviously,
why am I
because-
spending $15,000
Yeah.
a year for health insurance?
because unfortunately, you had to make use of the system. So
Right.
the money that I've been contributing all these years went to pay for your care, which is fine.
so we're
As
back
I
to the
said-
Social Security aspect. of
Well,
it.
it is. You're right. It is.
I mean, you can
It
go
is
to
very
the Oregon
similar.
plan, which says you only give care to people who are likely to benefit long term from it. So if you've got somebody who's going blind, but they're 80 years old and chances are they're going to die pretty soon anyway, we're not going to give them any surgery. It's, too bad.
See that you're
But
onto
see, I
something.
think that's wrong too.
See, yeah, but you're
that,
onto a-
that to me is morally
Yeah.
wrong.
But that's the alternative.
A doctor signs what do they call it? The Hippocratic Oath
Yeah, yeah.
to
do
make
no
sure
harm.
that they do their.
No, to do no harm.
No, I think it's. I always was under the impression it was to do their very best to make sure that
First-
someone would survive.
First do no harm.
So
harm.
if you're 5 years old or if you're 80 years old, to me it doesn't make any difference.
They don't make it worse, but they're not necessarily going to do anything to make it better. And in the
But I
Oregon
think they
plan,
should.
they
That's just a
institutionalized the
personal
concept.
opinion, but
Well, I mean, you get into a bunch of topics I don't know if you guys want to talk about,
Yeah,
about
'cause-
things that are going on today and decisions that people are making.
But if
And the
I'm
question
80
is,
years
who's-
old and I want to continue to lead a good quality life, and you're going to tell me that,
Well,
somebody's
that-
going to
see,
say,
if the-
well,
got
you're
two
80
people
years
who
old.
get the
See, if you were
operation.
suggesting that system
Yeah.
makes that decision, that's real controversial. I think if the person says, I choose not to have that surgery, right?
always
I think
have
that's
that
one thing,
choice.
right? But if the system says you're not eligible for it because we think long term you'll continue to have problems and you're not going to live a healthy lifestyle and you'll be a burden to the system, that's some pretty
Look at the
controversial stuff.
transplants, liver transplants. If you're not Mickey Mantle and you're living a lifestyle which is going to mean that you're not going to really be able to benefit from the liver transplant, the system says you shouldn't get it.
Now, were you saying that he'd get preferential treatment?
He was in New York when he had the operation, yes.
Yeah, but
That's
recently,
a fundamental supply and demand issue, right? I mean, if you have only a few livers, you've got
Yeah.
to have some system for deciding who gets them, right? I mean,
Okay, but this society has made a decision as to what the priorities are.
right.
yeah, but now they're
But there's no
starting
limit to how many.
offer-
I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
Now they're starting to offer grade B organs for
Right,
people
that's what I was
who
just
don't
gonna-
want to wait.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
I
a great idea.
read that they
Yeah.
These are
basically
from older
they're doing
pa-
it on a
patients.
great exception.
What is it?
A grade
Platinum,
B
gold,
versus
silver?
so you have a platinum gold.
You get a
I
grade
got a
A.
platinum card in here, boys.
So because there's so many people on the waiting list, they're saying, okay, we get these older patients who donate their organs. If you're willing to take an organ that's 50-something years old versus 20-something years old, the chances of you getting an organ are faster.
What did they do before? Were those organs thrown away, or were they just handed
they
out
weren't, they weren't used.
as the others are?
They weren't used.
That's a good question. I'm not sure. Would it make-
That's interesting.
They wouldn't harvest
But
them at
that's-
all. I mean,
Yeah, but that's only recently that's the past couple of months. Was in the
Past
paper?
6 months or so.
I hadn't heard that at all. I think it's a great idea. Yeah,
well, if it means more inventory, I just don't know if they're just reclassifying the inventory. And,
well, that was my
yeah,
question.
you know.
Yeah.
How do they judge that? How do they say, well, you're going to get Plan B versus Plan A?
Oh, he's got hepatitis, but maybe his lungs aren't too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll give him Plan B.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, is your credit good?
Ultimately,
And you get C.
it does come down to cost.
That the whole
Because there
thing comes
isn't
down
enough
to
for
cost.
everybody. If there was enough for everybody, then there wouldn't be an issue. Well, there'd still be an issue because somebody's got to pay the person who actually does the work and
Right,
takes the care, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
But this issue that we just started to talk about whether in fact Tony or Peter or Mike or I is eligible for something, that's a supply and demand issue.
Another way you could go with that is how about a means-based approach? In other words, if I have a transplant and I have greater economic means than you have, I pay more for that procedure than you do. I don't know that that's being tested anywhere. I don't know if that system.
who covers
It's sort
it?
of like Social Security. We talked about it, right?
Yeah.
That maybe people of higher means would receive less Social Security in the long run. And you guys kind of jumped on me and said, no, we all contributed. We should all get back what we paid in. And I'm saying if the system can't absorb that, what if we did that? What if someone of my economic means paid more than someone who was much less?
Right now, insurance is paying for these things because there's damn few people in this country who can actually afford
But
it.
let me call it a copay, just
Okay.
because we understand that concept.
Copay, all
My
right.
copay would be higher based on my income, my asset base, than it would be for, say, well, yours would be higher because we know how wealthy you are, Bob. We'd pay less than you would. Could that help solve some of the systems problems? Just like everything else, it's based on your ability to pay to some degree. In today's world, there's no correlation between your income and means versus the procedure you receive in the system.
That'd be hard to sell. Conceptually, I like the idea, but it'd be awful hard to sell. What
Well,
do you
heck,
do
if you're
with
going to
the-
do it that way, why don't you just charge rich people more for the healthcare coverage? And do
Well,
it, just
I hate to
do
use
it
the
up
word-
front.
See, I hate to use the word rich because there's a whole gamut of people in there, right?
The upper middle class.
I'm not
and
even, no,
higher.
I'm talking about us. I'm talking about us, right?
You're
We can
talking
certainly
about
pay
the
more.
average person.
We can certainly afford to pay more if you look at our balance sheet than someone who's maybe living in the city in total poverty for that same procedure. But yet, the way the system works today, our copay or our contribution to that is the same as theirs. And the
Well,
burden on them is much
the
greater than
person
it would
in
be on
total
us.
poverty is paying nothing.
Let's assume not total poverty, but the
Okay.
a hardworking guy or a woman who, just contributes whatever.
We're paying for those people that are in
Yeah,
total
but they
poverty.
themselves are paying nothing. They go to the emergency room, which is the most expensive place to go, and they get minimal care, but they get something, and then they walk away, and the hospital does not get the money.
A
Right.
homeless guy gets shot or hit on the street. He's got no means to pay for it.
I know, and that's why I don't like
Who
to-
pays for
but
that?
I don't, maybe
We do.
I'm okay with that. We talk about extremes, right? I mean,
Right.
the ultimate wealthy and the ultimate poor. It's really the fat middle that I'm talking about.
Right.
There's a kind of a wide range in there. Should we have some way of measuring their ability to pay based on their economic means?
No, I think we should go back to what he said in the beginning and correct the problems, like the people that were, ripping us off for $125 million for prosthetic
yeah, but I don't
limbs. And
think
somebody
that-
is
that's-
paying
Yeah,
for
but
that.
that's not the norm, though,
But
Mike.
yeah,
But do I think the system's inefficient? I think the biggest
Absolutely.
cost in healthcare today is not the doctors, it's not the hospitals, it's not that part of it. The biggest part is behind the scenes. If you go to the Leahy Clinic, 3/4 of the clinic is administrative staff, and all those people are doing is pushing paper.
Yeah.
And that's something that was created in the early '60s when Medicare and Medicaid and all these other social programs kicked in.
I actually
No,
can,
no way. The hospital's always had a ton.
Not
of
But-
not
but
like
Bob,
that,
but Bob-
Bob. Not like that. That's ridiculous.
on a
how many-
smaller scale, I can actually say you're right. My company, what my company does, we don't want to do a commercial, but we're trying to sell to the administrative environments of hospitals, and we can provide tremendous inefficiencies by them outsourcing a lot of those functions, and they're refusing to do it because they want to protect jobs and that sort of thing. And we could take a great deal of cost out of the system, just in my small world.
Yeah.
And if that's a microcosm of what's going on,
Well, I
right?
can tell you, Leahy has a sucky the computer system. I remember when they were just put in the new system, and it was green screen.
Right.
Still there.
Yeah.
It still is.
Right.
Because it's a for-profit institution, so why spend money on that when I can take the money and put it in my pocket as profit?
Because
You
if
get my bonus
do it
check.
right, there will be more profit.
Yeah, but I care month by month, quarter by quarter. I don't care
Well,
2 years
yeah.
down the road because I may not be CEO two
Right.
years. I may be someplace else, so I want the money now.
That's the biggest
want my bonus
problem
check
in
now.
American
Industry in
everything.
general.
Is the fact is that we're on a quarter by quarter accounting period, and if you can't show me that you did the job right this quarter,
You're out.
you're
You're
gone.
out.
You're
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Of course, you're gone with a $100 million golden parachute, but you're gone.
Right. And the analogy would be if you knew you were only going to be in your house for 3 months versus say 10 years, you'd probably make some very different decisions about how you maintain that house, right?
Right.
And every business and every hospital, whatever, is exactly the same thing. Short-term decisions are not good generally.
So so I think if you could find a way to eliminate some of those administrative positions, you'll see the medical costs go down. Now, why are those positions there? Because the federal government requires a ridiculous amount of paperwork in order to just pay a Medicare claim. So they need all these people, and oh, by the way, if you do one thing wrong, the entire farm goes back and
Yeah,
you have to redo it.
and it gets
That's also
rejected.
ridiculous. You know, why can't the provider or the underwriter call up and say, hey, on box such and such, you made a mistake. Oh, okay, you know, please change it too. All right, got it, thank you very much. Send me an email or something to confirm. No, it has
Nope,
to
they
go all
send
the
it
way
back, yep.
back. They have to redo it, and then it goes back. And we get those in the mail too. How often have you seen a bill 6-7 months after the procedure, you're still changing boxes on the application because the insurance company said you did something wrong?
Right.
Why
Peter,
can't-
but this is just like the, again, like the Social Security discussion we had the other night. I don't think you can fix the system to efficiencies that you gain. I don't think you can gain enough. It's like retail stores. You know how they always say they just build in 7% shrinkage of theft? They just never get the number to zero.
Right.
I think this is like that, and I think we need to do that.
Yeah, but I don't think it's 7%, Tony. I think it's like 40%.
Right,
But,
but let's say,
Tony, if
but
if
what
you
I'm
came
saying,
to your boss and he gave you a problem, he said, I don't think you can fix the system.
no, what I'm saying,
Where would you be?
I'd be fired.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, so doesn't the same hold true here?
No,
That-
but Mike, what I'm saying is, I think you can get that number from 40, let's say it's 40, down to 37 with all kinds of tremendous initiatives. I don't think that savings is enough to address the problem we're dealing with. I think we've got to find some bolder ideas. I think we have to do it, because inefficiencies drive me crazy too. But I think we need some bolder initiatives. Otherwise, I think the
So is
system's
it a
in big
bolder
trouble.
initiative to, like Peter said, to say, well, you know what, instead of sending the whole form back, to just pick up the phone and say, hey, you made a mistake here? Is that what you would call a bold
But see,
initiative?
Michael, your suggestion is if we went
I
to
think that's called a simplistic approach
no, but if
to
we
get
go to
the
that
problem
you're
fixed.
suggesting if we go to that simple approach, there won't be other problems that are related to that, like more fraud because there's not enough checks in the system. I don't think the payback is going to be as direct as you think it is.
Some of it is common sense to
I
me.
know it is. I know it is. All I'm saying
Simple common sense.
Well, don't you think the 80-20 rule is in effect here? That we're spending 80% of the resources to address 20% of the problem?
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
absolutely.
You know?
Exactly.
So somewhere can't we eliminate
we
some
come
of that
to a
20%
happy medium
and say,
somewhere?
you know, we're going to give you this, but if you mess up over here, we're going to come at you with both barrels. You know, fraud and abuse.
Oh,
We're
absolutely.
going to give you this.
Oh, Peter,
You know,
absolutely.
and
Yeah.
we're going to eliminate.
Yeah.
We're going to therefore reduce this 80% by half.
Yeah.
By saying we're going to give you this, but if you do cheat the system,
Yeah.
we're going to come after
Yeah.
you.
See, hospitals are not currently, you know, the whole Sarbanes-Oxley thing we talked about?
Yeah.
They're not subject to that same kind of punitive measures. The CEOs of commercial companies right now, Peter, they're scared. They are doing all their due diligence they can to make sure the financials
Well,
are
they
right
should now.
because
Well,
they're
that's
personally
what
Shouldn't they
responsible.
be?
Yeah.
So-
If a hospital is a
Don't debate
for-profit
me.
institution,
You're debating me before I make the point.
just because I can anticipate your question.
No, what I'm saying is that hospitals need that same thing. That in the medical industry, we need that Sarbanes-Oxley type diligence that holds these guys accountable. When they're fraudulent, they go to jail. They pay the penalties.
But a hospital is more of a business now than it was 50
Absolutely.
years ago.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, like he said, they're running it for profit.
Right. But those.
So
but,
if they
but I'm
run-
saying Sarbanes-Oxley doesn't apply to those guys right now. It isn't meant for the healthcare industry. Now I think it's
So
coming.
you're the CEO of a hospital, you don't have to know or disclose the fact that you know that your employees are stiffing the patients.
I don't have to know that.
Right,
Right. Why don't I have to know that?
because it doesn't apply to hospitals right now.
Oh.
There's no legislation.
But I'm running a for-profit business.
all my-
Gotcha. I gotcha.
My point was I'm agreeing with you, and I don't feel like you understand that.
That's not what we do here.
Oh, we were agreeing?
Well, we just argue for the sake of arguing.
I'll tell you one beyond that. We're beginning to make the CEO responsible. Eventually, the CFO will be responsible for the books that he writes.
That's right.
The part that is really ridiculous is every company pays a ton of money to their board of directors to oversee the operation and make sure things are going reasonable, that people are doing, even if they're being honest, they're not being stupid.
Yeah.
And we do not hold them accountable for
Oh,
anything.
absolutely, Bob.
Nothing.
Boards of directors are just, to me,
And what needs to happen
Useless.
is they have to become accountable. Enron might have
They'd
not happened if somebody had said, "Oh my God, I could go to jail for what you idiots are doing," as opposed to, "Oh, my stock option's going up. Great, keep up the good work, boys."
But isn't that all we really care about us as individuals, as our 401k and our IRA?
Yeah, if you're going to give me some of your 401k, I'm with you all the way. But you haven't done that, so I got to take care of myself.
And my health care costs.
Yeah.
I didn't own any Tyco stock, but I was perfectly, you know, if I did, I would have been perfectly happy under Kozlowski, as long as that money was rolling.
Sure,
in.
'cause you
I
would have been
actually
making
did
money.
own some stock, not a lot, but a little, and it was doing fine for a while.
And
Unfortunately, I got in a little late.
And then,
Story of my investing life.
Yeah.
You know, we kind of brushed by with something Peter said earlier, and that was the whole prescription drugs, the whole drug issue as it relates to the system.
why can't we go to Canada for drugs?
Because they're not going to let us anymore.
Why?
Because they said it last night, they're not going to let us.
Yeah,
They,
but-
they pulled the plug on us doing that.
I
But
wonder
why?
whether Washington made a phone call and said, hey, you know what? You got to stop doing this.
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to completely change the subject. Reading about the whole CIA incident in Italy, where they pulled a Muslim out of Italy a couple of
Oh,
years.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Well, the CIA came back today and said, you know, time out. You know, they knew all about it. We were working with them all along. What's interesting is, it said over 200. The CIA has worked both via their request or by the request of a foreign government to go into that country and pull people in and get them out of the country. So there's a lot of cooperation we never hear about. So it wouldn't surprise me at all that our best neighbor is cooperating a lot more with the federal government than we know.
By neighbor, you don't mean Garrity Ave.
No, I don't mean Garrity. I mean
A little bit of north
little
of that.
little
all
further
right?
north than
Yeah.
than
I'm the only one that
Garrity
doesn't live on Garrity, right?
Yeah, that's
Okay, yeah.
I'm, glad-
live in
I'm not
Canada?
one of them then.
Why did we let you in this?
I don't know. I'm like the token non-Garrity person.
I guess so.
So why, I mean, why not? Why not Canada? What's the theory behind
I
that?
don't see any reason why we get the free trade and everything. If I want to go there to get my prescription drugs and it
Why
is
is
the same
it illegal?
prescription drugs,
And why-
I don't. Maybe because there's an import tax. I don't know.
Well, I think the claim is they think it's a quality issue, right? That we somehow have
That's
these
the-
very high standards of quality. That,
That's the
Right.
claim.
right.
The same drug and
But
the
it's
same
the same
package.
thing.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
In
but
most
it's-
cases.
the quality in the United States is better.
See, my only fear about that is, Peter, you were talking about how doctors may be overprescribing drugs. Can you imagine if we ever did go to like Canadian type pricing and the price even came down further?
Well, that's the.
Then we might even get even more reliance because I
But
think
then
our
it-
system.
No, what if-
one thing I read as we were thinking about this, guys, is that in Japan, they on a per patient basis they prescribe much fewer drugs, and it's much more doctor to patient care, and I just wonder if we did get the price down on drugs, it would be even an easier avenue for a doctor just to prescribe a drug and be done with it and move on to the next patient. That'd be my fear.
Well, that's
may
a more
well
holistic
happen, but-
approach. But you know, one of the Canada, one of the reasons the drugs are as less expensive is because the government subsidizes.
Right, right.
And that's pretty much true of a lot of the world. Is the federal their government subsidize the healthcare system. We're one of the few countries that where our government does not subsidize. Of course, through taxes we do Medicare and Medicaid and all that other stuff, but we don't have a national healthcare system, which is when we get back into this liberal conservative thing here.
He
I'm
pointed at
not
me when he
su-
said liberal.
I'm not sure. I'm
He hasn't been listening.
sure I'm into a national
You
healthcare
haven't been
system.
paying attention.
No, I'm liberal, conservative. I'm not sure I'm into a national healthcare system, but that's why in other countries it's less expensive. But by the same token, England, that went to a national healthcare system about 15, 20 years ago, you know, not the best thing in the world. And
system's-
actually, they've
Do
had
they
it
have
for a
the
lot
same
longer than
problems,
that.
I wonder?
No, they have delays where you go to a government doctor and you have to wait 3 months, you know, because
Yeah.
you have a cold.
Can't get to see a doctor.
To see a doctor, or you go pay out of pocket and see
That's
a
what
doctor
happens.
right away.
A black market
Peter, are
starts to
you
emerge, right?
in your Cobra? Are you going to an HMO? 'Cause
No.
I can tell you that's how an HMO works.
Right. That's exactly how they work.
So we have that same system, except it's just a little more expensive.
Yeah.
So just because all the bad things about it doesn't mean we don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you were talking earlier. You guys were talking earlier about the next presidential election. I got to believe this issue. The candidate that comes up with anything that resonates with the public on this issue,
They
could
tried.
win this election.
They
saw what
tried,
happened
didn't?
with Clinton.
Wasn't that the issue with Hillary Clinton? Didn't
Yeah.
she try it?
You know,
And-
you know, I'm not a Hillary fan.
I know
Yeah.
I'm not.
Okay,
I'm
you
not
know I'm not a
either,
Hillary
but she
fan.
tried, and
But
she got
did,
nowhere.
A, she tried, and B, I think she wasn't really given a fair chance to
Of
really
course
do
not.
anything.
She ran
So we
into a
can't-
stone wall.
Right,
She
right.
really did.
Yeah, but the stone wall is on her side now.
Right.
How do you mean that?
Yeah.
Wasn't she on the press a couple of weeks ago with? I just lost his name.
On television.
Gingrich. He's,
Oh,
he's,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
supporting her. He was the one that would blocked her.
You're
Right.
supporting her medical reforms, not her politics. Yeah. Yeah.
Which may go hand in hand.
But no, the concept, they didn't give it a chance. They didn't go through
Right.
enough things to see exactly how it would work out. But the concept is exactly what we've sort of been talking about this evening, where we haven't gotten into what do you do about the poor SOB who needs something and just doesn't have the wherewithal, or worse yet, his kids need something
Well,
and he doesn't have the
Then
wherewithal.
if,
Yeah,
if,
that's
if
my
people are as
basic point.
passionate about this as we believe, and it is such an important issue, this could be the swing issue that gets Hillary elected. I mean, to take it into that realm.
Some child or person that can't afford it should not suffer. They just shouldn't, there are people that I think they just let go,
Right.
that they just
Right.
don't care about.
Right.
And they suffer because they can't afford medical care or medical coverage.
And I don't think they will.
Do people get turned away from hospitals because they don't have insurance?
I'll bet you.
Does that
I'll bet
actually
you, but
happen?
Mike, I think what happens more often in higher percentages, they just don't go.
Or they
wanna
just
face-
don't go.
They don't want to
But
face the
that's
embarrassment of,
that's a
of having
sin.
to ask for free care.
Absolute sin that
Right,
that should
right,
happen.
right.
It's just not.
I don't even know how
right.
to. I don't think you can measure those people, right? They're just not even going, and they're just
Right.
suffering.
Well, if you listen to Howie Carr, these are the illegal aliens. That's the only ones who have this problem, of course. And who wants to pay for these illegal aliens who do nothing for the society except work?
Years ago, this goes to early 80s, I was unemployed. And local dentist, visiting the dentist, he knew I was unemployed. And whenever we went to get the teeth cleaning or whatever, do you have insurance yet? No, I don't have insurance. And he just, this much money, and it was a ridiculously low amount, but this is how much he was charging me, and I paid him. Instead of him having, and it was up front, here you go.
Now,
why
suppose,
can't,
now suppose you had told him you made $100,000 a year. You think you would have?
he would have
Well,
doubled,
jacked
he would
it
have
up.
doubled
So
it up.
he was implementing the means-based system on his own,
Right.
right?
But the point is, it was, he just said, okay, just give me this and we'll call it even, and that was it. Why can't we do more of that? Why can't we pay physicians up front directly? So I come to you and I say, look, I'm gonna give you so much money a month, but when I come to see you with an illness or something like that, I don't wanna hear
Most
anything.
physicians probably just wouldn't do it.
They won't.
No, they won't.
They won't.
Well, and
Because
look
they're
at it
going to
from
be
their
assured
point
of the
view.
fact that
Yeah.
he's going to be able to pay, and let's say I couldn't pay, he's going to
Well,
get preferential treatment.
Yeah, but
just like Mickey Mantle.
But the physician's getting the money up front. They're getting it directly. It's not going through the insurance company. They don't have to do any paperwork or anything like that. I'm just cutting them a check every month.
Then essentially you are playing insurance company. You're putting him on retainer,
You're-
and he's taking a risk that when you come down to see him, that you don't have something expensive. I don't mean serious, I mean expensive.
Yeah, and it's
And he could say, after the fact, hey, I'm not going to get involved in this. You got this cancer thing.
I'm
Go
outta
somewhere
here.
else. I'm
Yeah,
done.
you go
I-
someplace.
yeah.
So you take a tremendous risk if you know the guy and or girl, and everything's cool, and you think they're going to be straight with you. Then go ahead and do it. But I don't trust people that much.
All right. So what about a dentist? Why can't I do that with a dentist? What's the worst? A root canal? How much does a root canal cost?
I don't know. I've had some expensive stuff in the last couple of years that come out directly out of my pocket because
Bridge, $2,000 for a bridge. I mean, is that uncommon?
probably more than that. I would
Yeah,
think. I
that's-
don't know.
I mean, that's-
I've been lucky, but
It's more.
But
it's
if
more now.
someone
Yeah.
comes up to you and says, "Well, you need
Yeah.
you need dental work for
Oh,
$2,000,"
it's outrageous.
Well, yeah,
most
but you know
people
what?
can't take a
But
check.
they're
and write
getting, but the price you're paying for dental coverage is that's within less than 2 years. They've already gotten the $2,000.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
so after year 2, they're ahead of the game. So when you do need that type of works,
well,
they're still ahead of the game
Look at
because
Grayson's.
they've been sitting on the money and they've been getting the interest on that money and everything else.
Dental raises that whole issue of care that's needed versus nice to have. I mean,
Well, cosmetic.
cosmetic, and it might even go beyond cosmetic. But there's a whole lot of medical things that people have done and go to doctors for that. I don't think you'd qualify as somebody suffering and having to have that procedure done. There's a whole set of that in the system that maybe is causing a burden on the system as well. Things that people are choosing to do versus having to do, right? If somehow you could sort of get that out of the system, that might also ease the cost.
how much of that is?
I wonder
really
how
I don't
much
know.
of that
I don't
is
know.
really
I don't
is
know.
covered. I think a lot of that is not covered.
Oh, you're
so
saying the insurance companies themselves have kind of.
Well, I can tell you cleanings. When I was in insurance, I had 4 cleanings a year, 2 of which were covered and 2 of which weren't. I needed them because I've got gum disease. Now that I'm not covered, I still have the 4 done, because that's,
And you-
I need it, I don't need it today. My teeth aren't gonna fall out
Right.
if I don't have it today. Eventually they will.
Right.
So, but there's.
But I think,
the
you're right. I
insurance
think the
company
system
is.
itself is lessening the
to a certain
coverages
extent.
to address what
Yeah.
I'm talking about, right?
I don't think someone's going to cover a nose job for
Right,
me, you know?
right.
Unless it's-
As a matter of fact, a
Unless we
number
break
of
it on
things-
you,
Yes, unless
then it's reconstructive.
We'll see you outside in a little while.
Well, it's unbelievable. I just, the whole question of the whole plan is just ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
And I really feel for people that just can't afford it. What do they do?
But
Where
you
do
know,
they go?
But see, like the thing I like, I'm going to praise Hillary a second time. The thing I liked about Hillary is she didn't just talk about, like we're doing here to some degree, about listing the woes of the system. She actually made concrete proposals to fix it.
Yeah, she really did
That's what I'd like to see more of, more dialogue, socializing, some real concrete, creative ways of fixing the system.
Then you have to go out and start talking yourself, because when Hillary tried and failed, everybody's backed away from it.
Yeah.
I'm used to being nice to Hillary. I'm going to be nice to George Bush.
Hold on, let's
He
get this on
actually
tape.
said, you know what, we got to do something. I don't agree with any of the things he suggested,
Yeah.
but we got to do something. And he's right. And he started the dialogue. So far, he hasn't been shot down. But if he gets shot down, it'll be 10 years before anybody else tries, because the political cost is too much.
Well, that's what they're looking at. They're saying, she tried, he tried, and they can't change the
But
system.
what are we saying? Are we saying the medical lobby is the medical lobby itself, or the industry is preventing
Probably
all
a
these?
combination
Well,
of
it's a
things.
combination of
Yeah.
factors, and it's got to be the medical lobbyists, the government itself, the senators, whoever else is involved in it.
No, Congress will always talk about it because that's a good issue to get for re-election.
right.
So yeah, I'm all in favor.
But you
of
want to see them
reform,
react to it, too.
But they're not going to react, of course. But I'm all in favor of it because I want you to re-elect me, and you get me out, and I'll go fight for these things. Then I get elected, and I
kinda
say,
called pork
I
barrel
tried, but I
legislation.
couldn't change
Yeah,
it.
I couldn't do it.
I was outvoted 391 to 1.
You know what's interesting about that? Other than Hillary, we can't name another congressman or senator that's really championing the healthcare reform. Isn't that ironic, given the size of this issue?
Yeah,
I'm sure there is somebody
But
there,
you think we would know more? They'd be more visible. We'd hear
Yeah,
about
there's
them.
no one that brought it to the forefront as she
Put
did.
his name on it.
Yeah.
Didn't Teddy get involved in that at one point?
No, he just said that the elderly can't afford it. He always comes out every once in a while and just talks about how the senior citizens can't afford all of these things.
He's always been a
and
champion.
then he goes back behind
Yeah.
the.
He's always been a champion, but he doesn't come up with any specific
Yeah.
programs. And that's what I think we need. Somebody just to offer
John
creative
Kerry
ideas.
didn't, so.
I didn't hear any from John Kerry.
No, there
You, now
really
you may
wasn't.
have heard some, but
You actually listen to him occasionally. Not often. But. Okay, so we've decided Tony's running for Congress, and healthcare is going to be his issue.
And
Okay.
what are you going to use for the standards?
actually, I was going to go to medical school and offer free care to my patients. That was what I was going to do.
You laugh at that. One of Kathy's cousins actually went to medical school at the age of 40, and got through, did all her stuff, and is now an anesthesiologist at the age of 60. And
Well-
she's still paying off her loans.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
And
One,
we'll pay
one
off
of the
her
most
loans for the
creative
rest of her
ideas I
life.
heard, I don't know if you guys heard this.
Is she
There
going
was
to
an
collect
notion-
Social Security, too?
Absolutely.
So cover all the issues. No, but one of the things I heard is that one of the ways of addressing this, one of the reasons the cost is so high is doctors' training is so costly. If the government somehow helped lower the cost of training, that if the doctors didn't have all these debts, that they could charge less, like you were talking about the dentist, and maybe that might be a way to get people to go into it and lower the cost, and they could drive it through the system that way.
Well,
We have enough doctors. Despite all
Yeah.
the stuff we're
You
hearing,
think we have enough doctors?
there are
Really?
more doctors now than there were 20 years
I think
ago.
it's-
Well,
but
then
you know
we'll go
what,
pull all these kids out of medical school now. They don't.
Make them all
Look at it.
lawyers.
Yeah. We'll make them all lawyers.
Can you say
There's something
liability
we agree on.
insurance?
Have we
Although-
successfully offended every group in
I
Burlington?
don't know.
Yeah. I'm sure we have.
I was in Florida during the last election, and
Which has the best healthcare system in the country. Florida's #1, primarily I think because that's where all the Graybirds
Yeah, but
retired.
they
to.
also have the hanging chads, too, so.
Maybe that's the reason why. But
long as
it's
the
still the
healthcare-
#1 for healthcare for elderly.
where did you get that statistic?
I remember reading it like a year and a half ago, and don't tell me why. I was on the internet, and every once in a while, the 10 best,
Yeah.
well, it popped up the 10 best healthcare systems, and Florida was #1.
He was looking up
That's
something
interesting.
about plants, and he found health and medical care costs.
Hey, marijuana is proven to be.
It's now illegal.
Yeah.
Can you believe that? Can you believe that? They found something that will help a tremendous amount of the population, and they have said you can't do that.
They won't even
before-
consider it.
Right.
Well, that's because of people who are going to abuse the system and smoke marijuana. So they're willing to say you can't have marijuana and eliminate that as a fraud and abuse type of thing. But over here, they'd rather spend billions of dollars to make sure that you don't mess up filling out your application.
Right.
Okay?
Well, morphine's got to come off the table too, because that's addictive, and we don't want to take care of anybody feeling pain, as long as it's not me.
Because they abuse that. and
Why
then-
do you think there's such an opposition to medical marijuana? Why would there be
Because-
such an opposition?
Illegal drugs, these horrible things. Alcohol, that's cool, no problem. But if you get a little bit high on marijuana, and by the way, I'm not a marijuana smoker, I haven't been.
But do you think the people who oppose it are thinking the way you just did?
Yes.
Really?
Yes,
How about maybe
it's
how
insane.
about it doesn't cost anything to grow it? Maybe there's
Maybe
no profit in it.
Maybe industry is
Okay?
opposing it.
You know,
Because there's no
I hadn't
there's
thought
no
about
structured
that, but
industry
yeah.
around that.
I mean,
right?
there's some highfalutin drug here that costs, that they're making millions of
Or
dollars
whatever
on,
it would replace.
versus something that
the
doesn't
chemical
cost anything.
alternative may be that whoever produces that may be opposing it.
How
I
about
just can't
that?
imagine why people would oppose this issue. It doesn't.
I don't know, and it was essentially being ignored. And somebody came out. I remember reading the thing, but I don't remember the jurisdiction where they came out and they said, this is illegal. It cannot be accepted under any circumstance. It was federal, because there's several states that allow it, and this was going to supersede the states.
And we're talking about a prescription-based.
Well,
use
that's the
of
way
marijuana.
to go.
That's
I
the
don't think
proposal,
that's
right?
what's being done
nobody's,
now.
nobody's saying you can just readily get marijuana.
All right, I get an idea.
What?
How about this? Okay? We take the Red Sox closer who's not doing the good job.
What the hell is the matter with him?
Okay?
Yeah.
And we give him some marijuana.
And he relaxed.
That's
They
right.
can grow it. They
Problems
can
will
grow
be
it out the
cured.
bullpen.
You guys are laughing, but his problem is obvious. You look at the numbers. I was listening to sports radio. When he comes in and there's nothing at stake, he's lights out. 1, 2, 3, right down the line. You put him in a safe situation recently, and he blows up.
Then
That's
He
his-
needs something to relax.
Then
Sorry,
it's
we didn't-
clear he
that's
should be
his-
sitting up in the bleachers
Did you
during
make
the
your
game.
point? We kind of interrupted you. I didn't know if you finished your point.
Why don't we
No,
just-
I think we're all done.
You think
No,
so?
no, we're not. We haven't resolved the Red Sox closing.
Yeah, we haven't resolved the problem.
Jeez, how could we? This is the Red Sox we're talking about.
I'm out of here. I'll see you guys later.
Okay.
All right.
See ya.
Have a good one.
Bye.